This story centers on Taka, who lost his mother at birth and his father at the age of 17. However, Taka never felt alone because on the day of his father's death, he found an adorable cat named Pete. Soon after, Taka was adopted by his uncle, Koichi, who had a daughter named Riko. From that moment, Taka began learning and mastering mechanical engineering from Koichi. Unfortunately, a few years later, Koichi and his wife died in a plane crash. On March 1st, 1995, news spread across television about Taka's success in creating an AI robot named A1. This robot was a household assistant that could learn and evolve based on what its owner taught it under the company Kazuto Future Work Enterprise. At the same time, snow began to fall outside, causing Pete, the cat, to keep asking Taka to open every door in the house to find a warm spot. Even though it was impossible, nevertheless, Taka always complied with Pete's requests because the cat never gave up. Meanwhile, Riko often came over to help Taka with household chores. That day, she brought news that in 7 days, she would be moving to a high school dormitory, which meant she wouldn't be able to visit Taka as often. However, Taka quickly reassured her, saying she could still visit during school holidays. At that time, Taka was also busy with his new project on an advanced plasma battery that didn't require recharging to keep the robot always active. This project was originally planned by the late Koichi and later perfected by Taka to fulfill Koichi's dream of having robots and humans live in harmony. At the same time, Taka's girlfriend and Kazuto's assistant, Shiraishi, arrived with some documents for him to sign. Riko, who seemed to dislike Shiraishi, decided to leave. Some of the documents Shiraishi brought included a decision to transfer some of FWE's shares from Taka to Shiraishi, which would promote Shiraishi from accounting secretary to executive. However, this transfer of shares was Taka's own decision because he believed Shiraishi could handle future responsibilities. After the documents were signed, Shiraishi gave Taka a loving kiss. A week later, when Taka arrived at the office, Kazuto held an urgent meeting with the shareholders. In this meeting, Kazuto plans to launch the animal robot earlier and sell its patent to Manix Enterprise to raise capital and outpace competitors. Taka immediately challenges this plan, arguing that they need a third model before releasing the robot to the market. Seeing the difference in opinions, Shiraishi suggests that they hold a vote. Taka is shocked to hear that Shiraishi, the third shareholder, supports Kazuto's plan. With this approval, the company's relationship with Taka comes to an end. Taka is also banned from using the company's facilities and equipment, making him realize he was set up. Furious, Taka immediately returns home. However, he finds that all of his equipment has been taken by the company. At the same time, Taka discovers a brochure from Critias, a company offering cryosleep services, which frees a person to be awakened in 5 to 30 years. Without hesitation, Taka takes Pete and heads to the company to join the cryosleep program. He also seeks the help of a lawyer to transfer his shares in FWE to Riko when she turns 20. Unfortunately, the doctors at Critias find high alcohol levels in Taka's system and realize he is depressed. The doctors refuse Taka's request and suggest he return the next day after the alcohol wears off and reconsider his decision. Meanwhile, Riko, who arrives at Kazuto's house, accidentally overhears Kazuto and Shiraishi planning to complete the plasma battery design with other technicians. At the same time, Taka heads to Kazuto's house to confront Shiraishi and demands the return of all his research equipment. Taka threatens to expose all of Kazuto and Shiraishi's scandals, which could ruin the company's reputation. Initially, Shiraishi seems to give in to this threat. However, when the opportunity arises, Shiraishi injects Taka with a sedative. Luckily, Pete, who jumps out of a bag, accidentally injures Shiraishi, causing him to get angry and chase after the cat. At that moment, a glass window shatters and Pete disappears along with Taka's car, which is driven away by someone. Shiraishi suspects that Taka came with someone, but he can't question Taka because he's already unconscious. In his confusion, Shiraishi finds a cryo-sleep brochure in Taka's bag and decides to place Taka in a cryo-sleep chamber operated by Mannix Enterprise. Shiraishi also reveals that he once worked at Mannix Enterprise to help them avoid taxes. As the cryo-sleep chamber is about to activate, putting Taka to sleep for the next 30 years, Riko suddenly encounters the person who had earlier driven away with Taka's car from Kazuto's house, leaving her shocked. In short, after 30 years pass, Taka wakes up in a futuristic hospital room, accompanied by the doctor he met 30 years ago at Critias. The doctor reveals that the man who worked at Critias 30 years ago was Taka's father. In his confusion, Taka immediately asks about Pete. However, instead of Pete the cat, a perfect humanoid robot with the same name appears, ready to take care of Taka during his 5-day recovery. Worse, Taka learns that he has lost all his assets because FWE and Mannix Enterprise went bankrupt during the last 30 years. Despite this, Taka will still receive financial support from the cryo-sleep compensation, though the amount is not substantial. He is also given the address of someone named Riko, who had asked several times when Taka would wake up. The next day, Taka decides to escape from the hospital, taking only his cassette player and wallet. He goes to a taxi stand, but no taxis appear. Finally, Pete shows up beside him and tells Taka that he needs to use an app to call a taxi. Taka grows more confused when he realizes that the taxi he's riding in can drive itself without a driver. Inside the taxi, Taka tries to ask Pete to get out, but the robot refuses, saying it just escaped from the hospital. Pete explains that there is a glitch in his program, giving him human-like curiosity. Pete follows Taka because he knows that Taka is a robot designer, and if something goes wrong, Taka can fix him. After throwing away Taka's wallet and explaining that all transactions are now done through phones, they finally arrive at Riko's address. However, Taka is shocked to find the house in a dirty and messy state. It turns out the house doesn't belong to Riko, but to Shiraishi, who is now overweight and living in poverty. Shiraishi pretended to be Riko to lure Taka to his home. He then explains that a year after Taka was frozen, Kazuto died from complications of diabetes. As a result, all FWE shares were taken over by another company. Soon after, a mysterious man revealed that Shiraishi had helped Mannix Enterprise evade taxes. This led to Shiraishi's imprisonment, while Mannix Enterprise slowly went bankrupt. Shiraishi blames Taka for everything and gleefully tells him that Riko actually died in a fire at Taka's house the night he was drugged. Although Riko's body was never found, Kazuto clearly witnessed the fire. This revelation breaks Taka's heart, and he immediately goes to Riko's grave to mourn the loss of his beloved sister. After spending some time reminiscing about Riko and Pete the cat, Taka feels compelled to find out who the mysterious man is and what really caused Riko's death. With Pete's help, they head to the library to search for information online. There, they discover that FWE was taken over by another company called Guardian Manufacturing. During their search, Pete suddenly prepares to enter sleep mode, which is the time for a robot to regenerate. Taka takes this moment to ask Pete to show his power source, and he is shocked to find out that Pete uses a plasma battery, a semi-permanent energy source that Taka never had a chance to perfect 30 years ago. Pete explains that he is a product of Aladdin Industries, which is now the leading company in the robot market. They then head to the Guardian Manufacturing office to meet the CEO of the company. At first, the receptionist robot refuses Taka's request, but after Taka introduces himself as the designer of the A1 robot, he is immediately allowed to meet the CEO, Goder. Goda is thrilled to meet Taka, which confuses Taka, especially when Goda explains that Taka is also the creator of the plasma battery and gave its exclusive rights to Aladdin Industries. Goda shows Taka a book he had signed when Goda was still in elementary school. He explains that Taka signed the book during a visit to Goda's family restaurant with Professor Toy. Later, Professor Toy was arrested by the police for embezzling university funds to finance his time machine research. Taka and Pete then head to Professor Toy's lab, where the professor is overjoyed to see Taka. It is finally revealed that Taka is responsible for all this because he asked Professor Toy to fix his time machine in the past. Without much discussion, Professor Toy, who has improved his research using the plasma battery, urges Taka to return to 30 years ago immediately. Professor Toy gives Taka some gold to deliver to his past self to fund the research. As Taka prepares in the machine and says goodbye, Pete suddenly jumps toward him, accidentally getting teleported with him back 30 years. Taka and Pete arrive at a place where they meet a man named Sato Taro, who takes them to his home. When Taka wakes up, Sato explains that Pete has told him everything about them coming from the future in Taka's plans for this time. Sato has already sold all the gold and prepared everything needed to support Taka's plans. Taka immediately starts working to perfect his plasma battery design within a week. The next day, Taka goes to Subway restaurant to meet Professor Toy and hand over the money from the gold sale. At first, Professor Toy refuses the money and doubts Taka's claim that he came from the future because of his invention. However, when the news broadcasts show Taka as the inventor of the A1 robot, Professor Toy finally believes him and accepts the money. At the same time, the restaurant owner's child, who recognizes Taka from TV, asks for his autograph. This child is Goda, who will eventually become the owner of Guardian in the future. That night, Sato, who is helping Taka perfect his design, asks why Taka changed the name of the A1 robot to Pete 1. Taka explains that he renamed it in honor of his pet cat, who loved the summer. From there, the Pete robot series evolved into Pete 13, which is now assisting Taka. During this conversation, Taka also asks for Sato's help to expose Shiraishi's crimes of helping Mannix Enterprise evade taxes. In return for Sato's help, Taka promises to give him all his shares in FWE and exclusive rights to the plasma battery design, allowing Sato to start his own company, which he names Aladdin Industries. Taka also asks Sato to let his sister, Riko, live with them. Sato agrees immediately since he and his wife, Midori, have always wanted a child in their home. Time passes and the day comes when Taka is betrayed by Kazuto and Shiraishi. Pete rushes to stop the truck carrying Taka's equipment and research, causing the truck to never return to the company. Meanwhile, Taka, having perfected his plasma battery design, heads straight to Kazuto's house. He witnesses Shiraishi inject him with a sedative before breaking the window to grab Pete, the cat, and escaping in a parked car. Afterward, Taka returns home to meet Riko, just as Pete arrives with the truck carrying the equipment. Riko is shocked to see Taka, though she doesn't yet realize that he is from the future. Taka then crashed his car into the house and sets up some equipment to burn and blow up the house. Kazuto believes this explosion is where Riko died, explaining why Shiraishi said earlier that Riko's body was never found. After the explosion, Taka introduces Riko to Sato's family, and Midori welcomes them warmly. Taka also takes time to say goodbye to his sister and Pete, who promises to wait for him. The next day, Taka goes to Cretius with Pete, the cat, to begin his 30-year cryosleep program. From that point on, Riko dedicates herself to her studies and eventually follows in Taka's footsteps by developing the next generations of Pete robots. 10 years later, Riko decides to undergo her own cryosleep, planning to wake up 20 years in the future. 30 years later, when Taka wakes up, he is reunited not only with Pete, the robot, and Pete, the cat, but also with Riko, who has just woken up from her cryosleep. The film ends on a happy note.
今もなお夏へ